First of all, I'd like to thank the chair for holding this hearing and for the witnesses being here today. Cybersecurity continues to be a growing threat, and I'd like to get your thoughts on what role the government should play in this area as this becomes a bigger concern to all stakeholders. With that, Ms. Baker, with regard to cybersecurity, there seems to be several agencies that are staking a claim of leadership: FCC, DOD, DHS, NTIA. With respect to the commercial sector, do you have opinions as to which agency should run point?
I'm glad you asked. It's a great question. We do have an opinion here. Cybersecurity is critical. These networks are going to change everyone's life, every job, our economy, but they have to be safe. And so cybersecurity is the most important thing that we work on every day. I feel strongly that this needs to take place within the administration, not an independent agency. So I think there is a coordination role that needs to happen between DHS, NTIA, NIST. I think we'd probably prefer DHS to be the lead with coordination from the others, but I do think one way or another it needs to take place in the administration, not in the FCC.
Thank you. Ms. Gomez, one of the primary challenges we face in securing our nation's communication infrastructure and networks from cyber threats is the rapidly evolving nature of these threats. Does NTIA have the ability to act quickly enough to adjust to new and emerging threats in its efforts to drive interagency cybersecurity practices?
Yeah, in keeping with your prior question, it is important that we have some kind of balance of economic and national security concerns and cybersecurity practices. The point that you're making is it is a challenge to keep up with changes in technology, and that is why you need an agency that can convene processes that are able to be flexible enough to be able to address those changes. NTIA could use more expert staff. They have very good expert staff. But as we look forward to continuing and increasing challenges and new and novel issues in these areas, it would be helpful to be able to bolster them. As I mentioned before, they also need the security clearances, which is part of the reason why they need additional budget to be able to get those clearances for their staff.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Gomez, you have the most recent tenure at NTIA. And how would you describe the relationship between NTIA and DHS in this cybersecurity framework? And do you think NTIA and the FCC have sufficient authority and ability to represent the interests of the commercial sector in this conversation?
NTIA and DHS has had a very good relationship, both on cybersecurity as well as on public safety. There are established processes in place. There are interagency groups in which they participate, so that is very helpful. I think having specific authority is always helpful to bolster an agency's jurisdiction, and I think NTIA does have a very good jurisdiction writ large, but it always is helpful to give them that specific jurisdictional authority in reauthorizing legislation.
And Ms. Baker and Mr. Newer, do you have anything to add, either one of you?
I think there is value in NTIA's role with its interface with the private industry. There's the response part of dealing with a cyber initiative, which is probably not going to be NTIA's role. But one of the greatest lines of defense in cyber is to share information on the nature of threats and the nature of attacks. Private industry sometimes is hesitant to share that kind of information because they're admitting to a vulnerability, or they're exposing a vulnerability, or they're concerned about litigation exposure. NTIA can play that role, taking some of the information from the private sector, bringing that into the interagency, and taking the best information from the interagency and distributing it back into the private sector.
Ms. Baker, do you have anything?
I think you've covered it.
Okay. All right. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.